This 11-year-old girl standing up was no taller than I was as I was sitting down. And I'm looking at her eye level. And her makeup had been smeared. She was scared to death. She was crying. And I thought, oh my hell. Every cell in my body wanted to just hug these kids and say, you're going to be fine. I look in her eyes and I made a commitment at that moment to myself, to God, to that child, that I would dedicate my life and my resources to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth.
And today we're joined by my man, Paul. He's going to share a whole bunch of his experiences, his stories, his evolution as an entrepreneur. Get this guy's going to talk about how he built and exited a phenomenal company in his 20s, which is something like 0.01% of people ever do.
I ran and led more than 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries. I'm the executive producer, primary investor in the movie Sound of Freedom. It's a #1 independent film in the world. Went head to head with Hollywood. And
he also dives into the depths of what he believes is going to be one of the biggest ways to overcome trauma that you're going to see in the next couple of years.
95% of our life is run by that subconscious mind. The substance in psilocybin, or in a lot of the psychedelics, creates a temporary state of neuroplasticity. Now, this is super important. Turning that gold bar back into that flow state. What can happen in that state? Well, a trained facilitator can go in and surgically remove that deep embedded wound so that we can get 10 and 20 years worth of therapy done in 2 or 3 sessions.
So you're not going to want to miss this episode. It is jam-packed with some amazing conversation around entrepreneurship, how to help and serve in the world, and how to get your mind right. This and so much more in today's episode, so let's jump in. Paul, I'm extremely excited to have you here, my man. I love everything about you. I love what we're going to get into today. But for those people that are listening and don't know who you are and how amazing you are yet, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and what you're building?
Yeah, thanks, Vin. Super excited to be on with both you guys today and your audience. So I appreciate that. So quick background. I've been a serial entrepreneur for many, many years, had some very successful companies, a huge exit at 29 years old, and invested in real estate, started a fund. But the story that a lot of people would be familiar with is I have a certain set of skills from a previous life, and I ran and led more than 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries. I'm the executive producer, primary investor in the movie Sound of Freedom. It's a #1 independent film in the world, came out in 2022, went head to head with Hollywood because Hollywood did not want it out. And there's a whole story behind that. And so I've been talking about everything from P. Diddy to Epstein for many years, and super grateful that they're finally coming out so that good people can win. We can shine the light on the darkness. So, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we can go down the process of how do you put 14 million into a movie that ends up doing 300 million at the box office? Or my investment fund ended up doing really well. I'm the co-founder of Bridge Investment Group. And when I retired in 2017, we had 4,000 employees, just under $20 billion in assets under management. I'm still an owner, still a founder, now over 50 billion in assets under management. So we can talk about scaling teams and building a business, but the real thing that touches my heart is helping entrepreneurs learn how to be incredibly successful so that they can move the needle, so that they can create a global movement in whatever it is that they want. There's no way that we would have been able to do what we did with Sound of Freedom if myself and some others didn't have the liquidity from being successful in business to go head to head with guys like Hollywood.
Man, we are going to need a little bit more time than we have slated for the podcast. and I might push to run over. So, all right, first question, because it's like, where do you even start with this guy? His background is so amazing. He's done so many things. He continues to do so many things. I think for me, my curiosity comes in first is like, can we dive a little bit into this exit you had in your 20s, which would arguably probably make you one of the most successful 20-year-olds in the world at that point. What did you wind up doing in your 20s? In fact, wait, before you even go to there, another question. How did you develop a mindset to be so successful in your 20s? Most 20-year-olds are partying, chasing ass. Like what got you to be this kind of guy?
I remember I was 14 years old, and I had braces for 4 years because I had really bad buck teeth, and I did all right in school, but I wasn't that popular. And I remember I came home. I said, Dad, I says, how do you become successful in life? I want to do something with my life so that someday that these guys will look at me and not make fun of me, right? And he gave me two things. He gave me a book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he gave me an audio program by Brian Tracy, The Psychology of Achievement. And those two gifts changed my life. The book by the How to Win Friends and Influence People was already 50 plus years old when I got it. It was all tattered. My dad had read it a bunch, but I recognized at that point that it wasn't all about me. That I literally could be, have, and do anything I wanted as long as I helped other people get what they wanted. If I could be genuinely interested in them. And then the psychology of achievement, I started recognizing the fact that our thoughts are things, and we can literally be, do, and have anything as long as we can believe it and start that positive affirmation. So I started doing those positive affirmations in high school and continued. And I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to be not a regular doctor, but a surgeon. Not a regular surgeon, but a heart surgeon. Not a regular heart surgeon, but one who operated on children. I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist, and I was a month away from taking the MCAT, got in a major car accident, severed the tendons in my hand. They didn't know if I'd have the dexterity to be a surgeon. So I changed my major to business and finance, started a company that it was a marketing company called Midwest Center Marketing. We owned worldwide marketing rights for the Midwest Center for Stress and Anxiety. We help people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, childhood trauma. They were doing $6 million a year, and they were in the red when I came on. And then I didn't want to be part of their company. I wanted my own marketing company, and we ended up with $72 million a year, doing very well with them and a bunch of others. I sold that company at 29 years old for $20 million. Now, a lot of that was restricted stock in a publicly traded company that I couldn't, but I was rich on paper. And that made me feel good about myself at the time. And that's when I started investing in real estate. And that's a whole other story that we can go down.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to understand that, right? Because there are a lot of our listeners and even some of my clients today who are like, Vin, how do I take the income that I'm making, the success that I'm having in business, but translate it somewhere else so that I don't have to work for every dollar? How do I find deals? How do I get investing? How do I start sourcing? How did you make that transition? Because there is a lot of difficulty in finding those right places, right opportunities, right people. What should an entrepreneur who has extra money looking to put it somewhere, how should he go about doing things like that?
Well, my answer goes way back to my early 20s when one of my mentors introduced me to Robert Kiyosaki. This is back when Robert had only sold 9 books, not 9 titles, right? Just 9 books, right? And he drew out on this napkin this cash flow quadrant type thing, and he drew out this little village and a lake, and saying, these guys are going up and down, they're carrying buckets and he says, you've got to build pipelines, you've got to create something where the water is flowing continually. He said, if you're trading time for money for things, you're going to do it forever. I don't care if you're earning $20 an hour or $2,000 an hour. If you're trading your time for the money, you're never going to be truly free. And so yes, I built a successful company. Then when I sold it, and I'm like, okay, now I have no residual income. I've got a lot of money in the bank, but I have no residual. I need to figure out how to make that happen. So I started investing in real estate. And honestly, I realized after about 2 or 3 years of investing in real estate that if I didn't hire guys smarter than me, I was going to lose all my money in real estate. I was making some stupid decisions, and I put together a team together with a guy by the name of John Pennington. John and I co-founded an investment fund originally called Bridge Loan Capital, doing short-term hard money lending. In the beginning, we had no credibility. It took a whole year to raise $2 million, and $1 million of it was of our own, right? We had to tell people the only way that you'll lose, I'll invest together with you, and we just didn't have the credibility. By the time I retired, we were bringing in $10 million a day into the fund, because we had built a track record that people like Morgan Stanley could say, yeah, I like your team. I like what you're doing. Here's $100 million that we want to invest with you. And so, the process of that, we started building. I think this would be important for your entrepreneurs to understand. In 2006, we hired a guy by the name of Don Hartman, and Don's resume was the most impressive piece of paper I'd ever seen. He had raised billions of dollars to bail out the Asian debt crisis in the late 90s, and I recognized the importance of hiring guys smarter than me all the way along. In fact, I'll come back to that story in a second. Let me touch on this because it's important. When I retired, the week before I retired, we had 4,000 employees, and I had one of the employees, he was part of the accounting division. And he came in, and his job that day was to have the partners sign up on our expense reports. So I was signing off on mine. Mine had front row seats at the NBA games and private flights and nice dinners and all this stuff, because I was capital markets. I was going to dinner with all of our investors, right? And I'm signing off on it, and he says to me, he said, "Mr. Hutchinson, do you mind me asking, how did you get your job?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you have the best job in the whole company. All you do is just fly around and go to lunch with rich people. How did you get that job?" And I realized he didn't know the history of the company. So I decided to mess with him a little bit. I said, "Well, Andrew, I used to do what you do." He goes, "Really? You were in accounting?" I said, Yeah. I said, I had created a spreadsheet to keep track of the asset values of all of our investments. I said, it was a 70 megabyte spreadsheet I created. And Adam was our auditor at the time. Now, Adam is now his boss, right? I said, Adam is the auditor, and he came in, he looked at the numbers. He said, "Paul," he said, "all these numbers are right, but there's a hell of a lot easier way of doing this than what you're doing." I said, "So I got replaced by Adam." He goes, "Really, you did?" I said, "Yeah." I said, and then, really, I just hired Adam, right? And then I said, "Then I used to do what Jonathan does." He goes, "Really, you were underwriting assets?" Now, Jonathan currently today is the CEO of Bridge, right? He says, "Really, you were underwriting assets?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But every day I had this big stack of papers on my desk. I went home with a headache." I said, "The only thing I was any good at was going to lunch with rich people, so that's where they put me." Right? And then he said, well, how many people were here when you started?" I said, "Well, just me and John." Right? So the reason I tell that story is back up to Don. We realized that the only way to build a multi-billion-dollar company is we needed to hire guys smarter than us. Right? John will tell the story a lot. They say, "How did you see it? Did you see the billions?" He goes, "No." He says, "But Paul somehow did. We were in a little office so small we would bump elbows, and we turned around and I'd be making calls trying to raise $25,000 by Friday for a deal, right?" And he said, "Paul would turn around, I'd put my pinky by my mouth like Austin Powers, right?" I said, "John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday." And he's like, "Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday," right? He did, but at the end of that day, I remember we sat down. He said, "Paul," he said, "you know that neither one of us have the pedigree, the background, the education to run a multi-billion-dollar investment fund." I said, "Yeah, but if we build it right, we build it with integrity from the beginning, we create a true win-win-win for ourselves and our partners and everybody, we will attract the right people." And that's exactly what happened. We hired Don on, and boom, in 2006, he saw the 2008 crisis 15 months before it happened. And we were able to position ourselves like the Big Short type of a thing, position ourselves in the right place to be able to take advantage of the greatest buying opportunity we would ever see in our lifetime. And so when the markets were crashing and everybody was losing 30 and 50%, we didn't lose any principal, paid out a double-digit return, and brought in $100 million that year when the rest of the market was struggling just to keep the money that they had. From there, it just continued to grow. Like I say, when I retired, $10 million a day. So the key was is having the vision of where we're going, building it with integrity from the beginning, being willing to bring on people that were smarter than me. Everybody from, the guy auditing us that replaced me in the accounting division to Jonathan replacing me on the underwriting, et cetera. That's why we built that team, and that's why we ended up as successful as we were.
That's a pretty incredible story. I think there's a lot more that's going to come into place besides integrity, hard work, grit, and hiring people that are smarter than you. I'm sure, you have a pretty good head on your shoulders, especially for, overcoming a bunch of bottlenecks, like, and hiring the right people too. Right? There's a whole different caliber of who is the right person. Just because they sound smart doesn't mean that they are smart. So reviewing actual credentials and resumes, I feel you have to be some sort of interview whisperer or something like that. I don't want to waste this podcast time and talk about your interviewing secrets or whatever the case may be, finding the right people.
I think that's a good question, though, and we're going to keep Paul here longer.
I'll go there with it. I'll go there with it. I have I've got a book coming out in the next few months called Your Infinite Wealth: The Golden Age of Conscious Capitalism, talking about how we can all create massive amounts of wealth for ourselves, for generations to come, in doing so from a true win-win-win, a true value for value standpoint. And I touch on there in chapter 4 on, I actually bring in meditation, and I put it the first. Now, why in the world would I put meditation or being in touch in that space in a business book? I've been teaching all these business principles. Why? Well, I have another book that'll be coming out later this year called Are You Listening? With My Hand on My Heart. Not are you listening here with my ear, but are you listening here? And there's so much more that goes on behind the front lines. And this goes all the way around. And I talk about the undercover child rescue missions, where there is so much more information that your conscious mind isn't picking up on. You can talk about, the fact that your subconscious mind was picking up on the little subtle cues of their body language, et cetera, that your conscious mind isn't. And then you can even go into the energetic connection that we have with everyone, everywhere, at every time. And that super conscious mind, and being able to tap into that. So yes, that it's something that there's no way that you can just be that right that often with that many good people. I truly believe that when you're in alignment, that you will attract the right people. The fact that I brought Don on, it was literally a 1 in a billion. He was one of the top 7 or 8 people in the world at analyzing banking cycles and credit crises. This is a year and a half before that 2008 crash. I didn't know I needed one of the top guys in the world that understood credit crisis. I had no idea, right? But it was a 1 in a billion that he was that guy at that time, that my kid's soccer coach said, "Hey, Paul, this guy just moved into the neighborhood and he's overqualified for everything in our area. I think he should talk to you." And I looked at his resume. I'm like, holy hell, yeah, let's talk to him, right? And so I that wasn't skill. Connecting with Don wasn't skill. Connecting with Don was visualizing exactly where we wanted, having complete, you can call it faith if you want to, that conviction, that unwavering conviction, and co-conspiring with the energies of everything to attract those right people to create something that can literally change the world. That's what happened with the Sound of Freedom movie as well. The statistical probability is 0. How do you make $300 million in a movie, especially if it's your first one? Well, you start out with $1 billion and you lose 3/4 of it, right? You don't invest 14 million like we did and then make that money. You don't do it. The only way that I can understand it is that those things were in alignment, and so the world needed to have that push when it came to understanding the darkness of trafficking, so that they could get behind putting the guys in jail who were part of the Epstein situation, et cetera, right? These are all things that are in alignment. This isn't a religious conversation. This is let's be in connection with the universe as a whole. Is one of expansion. It's not one of contraction. It's one of giving and receiving and continuing to expand. We live in a world of infinite wealth. We don't live in a world of scarcity. And when we see the world from a stage of scarcity, it limits us in all of our business dealings. Because energetically, we're not co-creating with the energy of infinite abundance. You open up any book on economics, And a lot of them, the definition of economics is the division of scarce resources. And that's a fallacy. There's enough resources that every person on the planet could have all the food we could ever eat, all the houses we could ever, all the clothes we could ever wear. The problem is that we believe that we live in a dog-eat-dog world. We believe that we live in a world where the only way for me to make $10 million is somebody else has to lose it. It has to come out of their pocket. It doesn't work that way. And when we mentally think that that's the way that we become a millionaire, then subconsciously we're going to sabotage our own success because we don't want that million to come out of the pockets of somebody who needs it.
Well, I feel like there's a lot that you just said here, and I can definitely see how you and Robert Kiyosaki are friends. I remember Rich Dad Poor Dad. I probably read it 4 or 5 times, and transitioning to Cash Flow Project and getting the game, and then me transitioning to buying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into metals. And you essentially are kind of preaching the same thing that he is. In regards to this mindset here, because that's really what it comes down to, is a mindset. I love your mindset. I have a question. Do you ever sleep? Besides that, you've gone into so many different things here. And, this show, we call it the 1% podcast. And it really always comes down to mindset and how you frame things, right? Instead of making excuses, it's, coming actions. And you clearly going from business to these rescue missions to creating the movies. I really, really have to know, what do you believe is your purpose in life?
Right here behind me. I truly believe, it says liberating humanity. Liberating humanity there. I could have retired. I could have retired at 29 years old. I don't know how long 20 million would last at my spend rate, but but let me answer it with this, because I think this is important. So 10, 15 years ago, I wasn't Paul Hutchinson. I was Paul fucking Hutchinson, right? I had built a multi-billion-dollar company, and I had an ego that was out of control. At one point, I had 2 helicopters, a plane. I had 56 vehicles that I had to get license plate things for. I had a house with 10 bathrooms, 8 private suites, 3 kitchens, 7 fireplaces. I had a basketball court in my basement, and I was a bachelor. I put stripper poles on a stage and put a DJ booth, and I had parties with NBA players and I wasn't doing anything illegal, but I definitely wasn't living my highest and best self. Okay. And that's the me that got recruited by our attorney general to help on a child rescue mission, because they needed funding for it. It was going to cost a whole bunch of money to fund this rescue of all these kids. If you guys seen the movie Sound of Freedom, my character is played by the producer, Eduardo Berets. He plays Pablo Delgado, the multi-billion-dollar fund manager who funds the rescue and goes undercover. That was my first exposure to this. And I was living in this high life and thinking I was all the shit. And I was brought down to Colombia. And I have some skills that makes me somewhat safe in that space, but we had real Navy SEALs and Green Berets that were there as kind of our protection. But I'm sitting on there on this chair, and these traffickers bring out these kids. This 11-year-old girl standing up was no taller than I was as I was sitting down, and I'm sitting on this chair and I'm looking at her eye level. And her makeup had been smeared. She was scared to death. She was crying. And I thought, oh my hell, who in their right mind ever would find that attractive? Every cell in my body wanted to just hug these kids and say, you're going to be fine. And I look in her eyes, and I made a commitment at that moment to myself, to God, to that child, that I would dedicate my life and my resources to eradicating that evil from the face of the earth. And I after that thing, I told the operators, I said, bro, that changed I said, I was going to buy a Aventador Lambo next week. I'm going to write you the check and say, how much do you need? And he said, Paul, unfortunately, there's a huge percentage of people who are like Jeffrey Epstein. They're these wealthy, big ego assholes that are doing this stuff. And that's what the traffickers are looking for. He says, if you're willing to be the bait, I'll change your whole life. So that was the beginning. I quit my job. I had plenty of money at the time and started doing the undercover work. And, but to be honest, for the first year, it continued to feed the problem. Because now not only did I have a nice house and nice cars and, now I was young and somewhat good looking and single and all this shit. Now I do rescue missions on the weekend. I had the best, you might have to bleep this out too. I had the best panty dropper story on the planet, right? And so I'm living this life, and I will go into this because I think this is important, and I want to go into this because this is really where my passion is now. Okay, so I had 2 of my operators call me. Now, at this time, we're blowing through undercover operators. I had Green Berets with 300 missions in Afghanistan. That one mission with me, it was the darkness of seeing that was just, it was too heavy for them. And they couldn't. So I was trying to find some ways to help these guys overcome some of their PTSD already. And 2 of my operators, Jimmy and Andy, called me. Jimmy had done 13 missions. Andy had done 22 with me. And they said, Paul, do you trust us? I said, yeah, I trust you with my life. Literally doing these missions. I'm in charge of talking. They're in charge of making sure I don't die. They said, you need to come to this healing retreat. And my exact words were, I don't need to heal. I'm Paul Hutchinson. Everybody wants to be me. They said, now you do need to heal. You're in your second marriage, headed for a divorce. Actually, just already got rid of that one. They said your kids don't even talk to you. You think that happiness is going to come from one more party, one more car, one more helicopter, one more girl. You need to come. And that experience changed everything for me. The facilitator, and I'll tell you how she did in a second, but she took me into this guided meditation trance and took me into this space where I felt in every cell of my being, I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom, as if I was them. It was so painful. And then I could feel, as if I was them, I could feel the joy of the children we helped to rescue. And then I could feel the joy of the people who I created jobs for in my company. But then I felt the pain, the ripple effect of my actions. Some guy came to my party and slept with a cheerleader and broke up his marriage. And the ripple effect of that, a year later, maybe his daughter gets abused by the boyfriend, or the son gets addicted to drugs because they didn't have a dad in the family. And the ripple effect of my words and my actions and the things that I was contributing to the world was right in my face, as if that was me. And that changed everything for me. At that point, I got rid of the house, the cars. Now, those things are okay. You can do that. I chose to purchase healing retreats. That we run these healing retreats around the world now, and have people come in for fully immersive transformational experiences.
I can definitely tell why you have and are writing multiple books. Holy crap, man. I feel like I'm already just living through an actual movie here from already start to finish, with just this 10 minutes you've been talking about this entire lifestyle and this envisions here. I feel like not a prequel, but an autobiography movie is coming up, self-funded and directed and produced by Paul Hutchinson.
Well, I don't want the spotlight to be on me, but at the same time, if it can help people, then yeah.
I mean, it's about where you end up, right? Oprah Winfrey's books, when she picks books and chooses books, it's not how you started, it's how you ended up, right? But obviously, the journey is what makes you who you are. So we've talked about the business, we've talked about the success, we talked about where you're at now. I'm generally curious because this specifically right now is February 5th, 2026. Epstein files have mainly been leaked outside of the actual, concealed documents that no one can essentially get to, right? We'll put them in air quotes at this point. What is your relations with Epstein? What are you comfortable with saying, I understand the vision of why to actually produce and get this movie out here, because of your travels to Colombia and seeing the actual kids. But why not just keep it at that? Why specifically make it about Diddy and Epstein? And can you shed some more light into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the movie simply sheds light on trafficking as a whole, and hundreds of millions of children are safer just because of the awareness of those conversations. However, since that time, I've been on lots of podcasts, and a year, 2 years ago, was talking about Diddy and Epstein before it was mainstream. And it's important for people to hold their leaders, hold their idols accountable. Nobody's above the law. Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or a rock star or a senator or a president. It doesn't matter. Nobody is above the law especially when it comes to protecting our children. And, we can all disagree on a bunch of stuff. We can disagree on whether we put money into saving the wells or saving the trees or invading another country or politics or whatever. But most of us can all come together on one thing. Children should not be used for the pleasure of an adult in sex, period, ever. It just doesn't, that is something we can all get on the same page and agree with. And the challenge I have with the situation with Diddy is this. First of all, President Trump has done more to fight child trafficking than any other president. However, the last few months, statements like, the Epstein, we still talking about him? Yeah, we are still talking about him. There's thousands of victims that need to be vindicated. There are thousands of perpetrators that need to be brought forth, right? And the challenge is that the powerful people who are really involved here are so powerful that we're never going to see the full truth. Let me just put it this way. I'm not going to speak very specific names, but I'm just going to say this. If you were an agency, foreign or domestic, if you were an agency that saw yourself as above the law and you wanted to control the votes of a senator, of a congressman, of a federal judge, you wanted to control their votes forever, you get them on film with a 12-year-old. You control it forever. You want to control a billionaire that you're making sure that, he's going to be successful in whatever company because you're putting all these things in place and you can control the algorithm. You need to have that level of control over them so that they don't go rogue on you. And that's what happens. I'm telling you right now, that's how deep the swamp is. And sadly, children are being used to create that level of blackmail control. And that's what Epstein was all about. Epstein did not kill himself, period. Everybody knows that. Now, whether he was taken out by somebody else or whether he's still alive, that's something that could take an entire other discussion, But we all need to demand justice. We need to demand to see the truth behind what they're still hiding. And once we do, I think that there's going to be some very powerful leaders that would be brought down.
Man, it's such such a tough subject. I've worked with, obviously it's been different for me, but I've worked in homeless shelters. The ones that I was in was for single women with children, and the women experienced domestic violence. Some of them were, gang raped and all this other stuff, and it was rough. And they had these children that were going through these hard experiences too. And there's something really interesting about the worst part of humanity. And I think that it has a way to do one of two things. It either has a way of making you force yourself into a commitment to see that there's a need for you to be more than you currently are, or it just breaks you as a person. Obviously, it's done similar for me, what it's done for you, it seems like, where we're both in like, how the hell do I help? How do I push back on this problem, this pain? How do I serve and show up? How did you really, I know you told us that story, right? About how you saw that girl and it really changed the things for you, but like, what do you feel was actually that push behind it? Like, yes, the girl, the scenario, the burning pain or in your heart and the commitment you made from there. But like, why do you feel like you didn't break? You resolved stronger? Because some people do break from this. What could you attribute that strength to?
Number one, my faith in a higher power. I think that's paramount across the board. Number two, the work that I did in my 20s and helping people overcome anxiety, depression, PTSD, addictions, and in helping them cope with some of the darkness in their life. I had some of those coping skills. But I will say this, my determination that really drove me to not only create the Child Liberation Foundation, but liberating humanity as a whole came from realization of the man in the mirror. What I mean is this, I was protecting children. I wasn't doing anything illegal at all. But I recognized the very first rescue mission I was a part of, I thought that these guys would have earrings in their noses and tattoos on their necks. And the first trafficker I met was a businessman. It was clean shaven, well spoken. The next I met was a beautiful woman running a modeling agency. If people have seen the movie Sound of Freedom, they'll recognize that. And I thought, these guys aren't traffickers, but I recognized, yeah, absolutely. They were doing the most horrific things you can think of. And I recognized over years that the common thread with these guys wasn't earrings in their noses and tattoos all over their body. The common thread was arrogance and greed and lust and unhealed childhood trauma. And I eventually had to look in the mirror. And I said, okay, Paul, you're doing great things. You're doing some charitable stuff, but how has arrogance, greed, and lust showed up in your life? How's it affecting the people around you? Every one of us has to recognize the ripple effect of how we show up in our businesses, how we show up in our families. We think that what we're doing is a victimless crime, where so many guys are addicted to pornography. And, it doesn't mean you're going to become a pedophile. But almost every one of these guys that we arrest has started out with a hardcore addiction, because the very second that you take a woman from the divine feminine to an object, you start going down a dark road. And you start playing in that energy of, hey, it's okay to objectify, and it's okay to, see myself as better than somebody else. And many times with those guys addicted, they need something harder to have that same fix. And for some of them, harder is a little bit more, brutal videos or more rape stuff, or some of them harder is a little bit younger. And pretty soon they're fantasizing about things that they wouldn't even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And it creates a tsunami of demand, being the fastest growing criminal enterprise in the world, and good people don't talk about it. And it's because we have lost our humanity. We have started objectifying each other. We have stopped looking at each other as the divinity in that other person. And once we can start recognizing that and seeing how that man in the mirror needs to change. In fact, one of my favorite little mini stories is, a man is sitting on a couch and his little boy comes in and says, "Daddy, I want to play baseball with you." And he's reading the newspaper. He goes, "Oh, no, sorry, I'm busy right now." And the boy comes back a few minutes later. He goes, "Daddy, it's a beautiful day outside. Please, can we play baseball?" And he turns the newspaper and he sees there's an advertisement that has a map of the world on it. And he has this idea. He tears out the map and he tears it up in a little piece of paper and he throws it on the floor. He says, "Son, you need to learn your geography. Go get some tape together every country, every piece of ocean, everything exactly how it's supposed to go. If you do that, then I'll go play baseball with you." He thinks it's going to take an hour or two. 5 minutes later, this little boy walks in and it's all perfect. And the father says, "Well, how did you do that?" And he turns it over. He says, "There was a picture of a man on the other side. I just put the man together and the whole world came together." That's the answer right there, guys. All we have to do is take a look at the guy in the mirror. What does he need to change? How does he need to show up differently? Once we do that, then miraculously everything else starts falling into place.
I love that, man. What I predominantly do with my clients is what I call identity work, because to know the world is to know oneself, and to know oneself is to know who you are. And it's so powerful. So I have to ask, I mean, okay, entrepreneur, philanthropist, film producer, helping in child trafficking efforts. You have these amazing things. You've also said that you've done a lot of work in helping people who have struggled with trauma. I'm assuming that's stemming from your experiences doing the work that you do. You were talking a little bit about it with me prior to even the show starting. I'm super curious, you know, because you also have a belief that this is something that's going to be big, taking off in the next 2 years. Can you talk a little bit more about that, what you're working on and what you're building there, and what people should probably be on the lookout for the next couple of years in some new trends regarding mental health and how people can, you know, get in on that?
Absolutely. In fact, this is my greatest passion right now. Now, some of you guys are going to need to sit down when you hear this. You're going to be like, what? But so that retreat that my operators took me to, where it changed everything for me. It literally just opened up my heart, and I was able to feel this perfect connection with everybody, the good, the bad, the everything. And it was so transformational for me. Came from a doctor that they were working with and some scientists that had been working for a while on identifying the proper use of psychedelics when it comes to trauma therapy. Okay. Now, at the time, I thought, wait a minute, you know, things like psilocybin, that must be dangerous like cocaine. It must be super, super bad. The truth is, this is important that you guys do your own research on this, that your audience does, that the truth is psilocybin is safer than table sugar. There's never been a case of addiction, not one ever. There's never been a case of overdose. In fact, for me to overdose on psilocybin, I would have to eat 70 kilograms of it. You eat 70 kilograms of table sugar, you die, right? And but what had happened in the late 60s, President Nixon threw all of these things under the bus and labeled them as Schedule I drugs. And so our entire life, we've been taught that these things must be bad. Now, I am not a fan whatsoever of somebody going to a rave party and getting high with their friends. It's not only a bad idea, it's dangerous. And let me tell you why. So our brains, when we're little kids, when we're 0 to 9 years old, we're in a state of hyper neuroplasticity. We're very, very impressionable. In fact, our dendrites are growing, where our brain is developing, and we're in this very state wherein we can learn 3 or 4 languages at the same time. We're learning how to ride our bike and all these other things. But if something happens during those formative years, your uncle does something super inappropriate, your dad does something simple, like says, hey, you look ugly and blue, whatever it is, those things get embedded. And if you imagine your subconscious mind is a gold bar, and in neuroplasticity, it's in flow state, right? And you can mold it into whatever you want to. And if something gets deeply embedded, that situation with your uncle or whatever, it gets embedded, the rest of your life, now after you're out of that neuroplasticity, now that gold bar, your subconscious mind is hardened. Now it takes 21 days or longer to chisel at it and to change things in that subconscious mind. But 95% of our life is run by that subconscious mind. And so the substance in psilocybin, or in a lot of the psychedelics, creates a temporary state of neuroplasticity. Now, this is super important. Turning that gold bar back into that flow state. What can happen in that state? Well, a trained facilitator can go in and surgically remove that deep embedded wound that was there from your uncle, because now it's in that flow state. You can literally go back and have a conversation with your 7-year-old self and give him that love, that help, that healing, those words that he needs, the hug that he needs to help him heal in your 42-year-old body. However, you do mushrooms with your friend at a rave party, and you've got rap music going on over here. You've got a orgy going over there. You got somebody yelling at their girlfriend over there. You're in that state of neuroplasticity. Opening up your subconscious mind to that kind of an energy, it's dangerous, right? And so we have been, it was so transformative for me because of the fact that my ego had created these barriers, and my trauma from before in my life had created all these walls, that there wasn't any therapist that was going to pound through that. My ego was too big and my walls were too thick. And so being able to be in this state with the right music and the right intention and the right facilitator that could help walk me through those, take me back to that 7-year-old self where the boys were yelling at me and throwing rocks at me. And ask me, here I'm sitting there. I remember the facilitator asked me, he says, okay, Paul, I want you to go back to that 7-year-old. What would you tell him right now that would make him feel better? And I remember telling him, don't worry about those boys. You're going to grow up to be a millionaire and marry a movie star, right? But it was super beautifully healing to be able to say those words to that 7-year-old, right? And so moving forward, we host healing retreats. I have hosted and now facilitated almost 90 guided meditation, breath work, healing retreat experiences over the last 8 years. We're trying to change the laws in the U.S. We're successful in Colorado, Oregon, and others. I've been friends with RFK for about 10 years, and he's agreed to come in and help change some of the laws when it comes to decriminalizing these things. You will see in the United States, within the next 2 years, you will see these tools be decriminalized. And when it is, it's super important that you respect the medicine, understand how it can be used and how it shouldn't be used. And I believe at that point, people like Vin and others who are already amazing superstars at helping people break free of some of their toxic patterns and habits and whatever else, some of them as personal coaches will say, okay, now that this is decriminalized, I'm going to find out the proper use of being able to create that temporary state of neuroplasticity so that we can get 10 and 20 years worth of therapy done in 2 or 3 sessions. And so I've seen it over and over. I've seen it with undercover operators who had PTSD for many, many years. I've seen women who had 42 years on SSRIs, anxiety, depression medication, that coming down with us for 4 days in a fully immersive retreat, boom, they're completely off their medications for good. I've seen guys that haven't been able to sleep at night for the last 20 years from their anxiety. That I was just on the phone with one of them earlier today that came to a retreat 3 months ago, crying on the phone, saying, Paul, I am so grateful that I'm able to see the sun every day and feel love in my heart every single day. So anyway, that's a high level. You can learn more about that at Liberating Humanity and come and join us on a retreat. But in the next few years, those laws will change, and it's important that we understand how to use them right.
It's amazing, man. I think everybody's probably got to be on the lookout to start seeing what's going on, and it's really, really fascinating to me. I personally want to learn more, so I'm excited to connect with you further after the podcast because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about, and I'm looking forward to that for sure. So we are kind of getting close to the end here. I have 1 or 2 maybe final questions for you. One being, what would you say is one of the best pieces of advice that you've ever received that you can pass on to our listeners?
Oh, I've had so much.
It's so hard.
Best piece of advice. It came from a good friend who we were talking about how when Yeshua, Jesus, was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, mind, and strength. The second is like unto it, love thy neighbor as thyself. He said, the thing that people miss is the third love there. It's to love yourself. Everybody's like, okay, I'm going to love God. I'm going to love God. I'm going to love my neighbor. And they don't love themselves. You can't love anybody else more than you love yourself. And if you don't love yourself because of how you're showing up in the world, then that needs to change. You need to get to the point where you can truly see yourself as this divine being that can create and do so much good in the world, and forgive yourself for the crap of the past. It's in the past. You can move past it. That doesn't have to define your future. And I think that all unhealthy relationships start with a lack of self-love. All failed businesses start with a lack of self-love. If you can truly see yourself and love yourself and honor yourself, then you're not going to steal from others. You're not going to hurt others. You're not going to create things that are going to destroy lives and destroy the earth. And so I would say that understanding that principle, that there's a love yourself that is an incredibly important part of it that people miss.
I love that, man. I was talking to my friend Jen today about that the importance of understanding the world is understanding you, because you are the world. You are the reflection. Everything that you see and experience, all of your relationships, your income, the scale and size of your business, your family, it is just a reflection of how you show up, which is why you have it. And then people don't understand the things that they want, they don't have, because they're not yet the person. They haven't evolved into that version to make that world exist. So I love that piece of advice. I hope everybody runs with it. And Paul, I know your purpose is to liberate humanity. What do you think when you hear the term like living a 1% life? When you hear that term, when you think about that, I know you don't relate it right away to being a billionaire and all this other stuff, but what does a 1% life really mean for you? Liberating humanity, helping the world. How does that translate in your mind?
I would say stepping into your highest and best version of yourself. And that's what liberating, I'm nobody's savior. I'm not going to save anybody. I'm going to give them the tools that they can learn how to liberate themselves from their addictions, liberate themselves from their childhood trauma, liberate themselves from financial burdens and scarcity mentality. All of these things are, even liberate ourselves from the systems of control that are keeping us in control because of fear-based dogma and fear-based control, whether it be, institutions or religions, et cetera. Once we can break free of that and step into the highest and best version of ourselves, and that's different for every one of us, but every one of us have a divine calling. Every one of us have a divine path. Every single one of us can release everything that doesn't serve us, step into that frequency of love for ourselves and for humanity as a whole, and break out of the chains that have been holding us for thousands of years.
Very well said. Just like a true 1%er who wants to liberate humanity. Paul, big question for you. How can people get in touch? How can they connect further? How can they be a part of anything you're doing? What are some of the best ways for people to really get a little bit more involved in your life, your ecosystem, the mission? How do people get in touch?
Would love that. All of my social media is all just liberating humanity. You can go to liberatinghumanity.com and get information on the retreats. If you want one-on-one time with me, it's funny. People ask, well, how can I get an hour of time with you? Well, when I'm speaking at these big events, if they donate $10,000 to the Child Liberation Foundation, then I donated an hour of my time to them and mentoring them one-on-one, their company, et cetera. Or they can pay even less money than that, and I'll spend 6 days with them, but we're going to work on their shit, right? So, one-on-one time in person is always just at the retreats, and that's where my passion is. And so come to one of our retreats and I'll spend one-on-one time with you, but we're going to work on your shit. Beyond that, the Child Liberation Foundation can be found at childliberation.org. And you can see what we're doing there. Of the 10 years of undercover missions that I did, the foundations that I funded, we rescued more than 7,000 children. However, today, under the leadership of my wife, the Child Liberation Foundation is helping more than 10,000 children a month in preventing them from being trafficked because of our foundations that we fund that have teams on the ground that are identifying as they're coming across, our certification programs of doctors and people in hotels that are identifying, et cetera. We are working on a global scale and making a difference with the kids. And I will say this, I have to do my mic drop here. So my wife is Ada Vanessa, Hada Vanessa. I met her in Haiti. I tell people meeting a beautiful Colombian actress is kind of cool, but when you're donating your time at an orphanage in Haiti, that's really cool. And my favorite story, I'll end with this. So if you guys know who Henry Cavill is, Henry Cavill is the actor who plays Superman. I mean, the jaw and the chest, and he was that Superman for the last 5+ years. So Henry was at her work almost every day for about 2-3 months. They started to date, nothing big in public. They went on like 2 or 3 dates, but then she met me. I stole Superman's girlfriend. What?
Damn.
That's my
That's
mic drop.
great.
That's pretty impressive.
Probably the biggest flex that you've dropped on this podcast. I don't care about anything else at this point.
That's right.
Good thing you ended with this. Nobody would listen after.
Paul, aka Lex Luthor.
That's right. It's Batman. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
That movie, Superman, Batman wins out. You know, on the Marvel series, one of my favorite lines when somebody asks Batman, they say, "So what's your superpower?" You know, he says, "I'm rich," right?
Yep.
So.
I love it. Paul, this has been such an amazing episode. Thank you for bringing everything, your experience, your wisdom, but most importantly, your light, and for sharing your story with our audience. Hang around for a minute. I got another thing or two to tell you. And thank you again so much for coming on today's episode.
Thank you. Thank you for building an audience and trusting me with your audience. Super grateful.
Of course, man. Well, guys, there you have it. The illustrious Paul Hutchinson, or Paul fucking Hutchinson. Nah, he's not here anymore. But we have this amazing man here, and he shared his time, his wisdom, and his information with you. Please let us know what you thought of the episode. Drop a comment, like, share, follow, subscribe, send this to a friend, send it to anyone who you think might need it, and we'll see you on another episode of the 1% Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Vin, and
And I'm Shane.
that was Paul. See you, everybody.